Seeing how other people make movies has probably been more influential to me as a filmmaker than the movies themselves. Making ofs taught me that, like any other craft, movie magic is built. It's constructed with time and tools, patience and practice. So in that spirit of sharing, I want to take you behind the scenes of a typical day on the set of my upcoming short film, Night and the Snail. The day typically begins here in my studio, where I take a look at my storyboards. Storyboards are kind of like the comic book version of a movie. It shows how close the camera has to be to certain characters, what actions or dialogue are happening in certain shots, and what the camera has to do to capture them. If you have to build everything in your movie from scratch, picking out what camera to use or what lens to put with it can be a little overwhelming. So, to help with that, Canon have sent their EOS C80 for me to shoot this film with, and I am so excited to show you what this tool has allowed me to capture. So special thanks to Canon for sponsoring this video. Okay, so in reviewing the storyboards for today, I think the shot that we're going for is this one, 2F. Essentially, the sire and the boy have arrived to these ruins. The sire is introducing the boy as a knight, and he does this sort of like arm gestury thing. So we need to make sure that the sire's puppet is able to do that. The morning of a shoot isn't really about building anything brand new. It's more about tuning up. So really it's just making sure that all the mechanics that I've already kind of worked out are functioning properly, are tightened or loosened to the tolerances that I need for him to perform that motion. Weeks ago, I kind of discovered that paper boba straws are like the perfect thing to use for arms and limbs for this, because they're super thick, and I found that by slicing them down the back and kind of like tapering their shape, it gives you a decent cylindrical shape that kind of mimics an arm. And then to get this kind of rotational pivot motion, I found that by using regular sized paper straws, I could get a rotation on the hand. So his chainmailed hand is actually attached to the end of a little piece of a normal paper straw. He has a tiny slit in there that allows for the puppet rod, which is a fancy term for just a scrap of metal that I cut out, to fit right in and not occupy too much space in there. That fits into the boba straw and should be able to indicate to his boy, who is behind him here. So morning of a shoot, I like to go in with a silver paint pen and really just bring up all of his little rivets, and it gives them almost a mirror-like finish. And this only lasts like a couple hours because you get my grubby hands on it and it will lose all that sheen and all that finish. So it's really kind of like a final touch before cameras roll. The boy in the scene doesn't really do anything big physically. I still want to make sure that his horse and his body are able to kind of stay lively. And the way that we do that is by working the head against the horse and its movements. Despite this horse being made out of a lot of metal, he's actually pretty flimsy, but we're going to use that to our advantage. So anytime you see someone like on a horse, the person sort of has to adjust their gravity with them. With both of these, we can get a nice natural kind of rocking. And as the horse moves, I can keep this rod in place to make it look like this character is compensating for the horse's movement. So I think these guys look good. I could probably be in here fussing all day long and not filming. The closer I look, the more cat hair I see like built into the paint job. There's dust everywhere, but at a certain point you just got to roll with what you've got. So let's head out to the garage. Welcome to the set of Night and the Snail. This is the largest and most detailed set I've ever built. There's about 50 trees, most of which stand at 4 feet tall. There's almost 5,000 hand-punched leaves, and that's only counting the ones on the ground. And yet, all of this is technically just the background of the main action that happens on the main floor here. But I don't want to lose all that work and detail in an overly blurry background, the way that you see in a lot of miniature photography. That style definitely has its place, and it's very pretty, don't get me wrong, but For Night in the Snail, I took inspiration from medieval manuscripts, and there's no blurry backgrounds in those. Everything is crisp and in focus. And while I can't get that exactly, this camera lets me get kind of close by adjusting what's called the aperture. Aperture is the word for the opening in the lens that either opens wide to allow a lot of light in, or closes down to just allow a little light in. It's like when we squint our eyes to make everything a little sharper. I know I do that all the time when I'm looking for these. Well, camera lenses are pretty similar. You can make them squint to sharpen the image, but the trade-off is light. So we have to brighten the image with what's called ISO. Think of this like a brightness slider for your camera phone. You get a brighter image, but the more you crank it up, the noisier and grainier the image gets. But not so much with the EOS C80. This camera has what's called a triple base ISO, meaning depending on how light or dark your scene is, you can worry a lot less about getting grainy noise in your picture, because there are 3 base ISO levels, 800, 3200, and 12800. Set your camera to whichever base your environment needs, adjust your precise ISO level around that, and you'll have plenty of light with little to no grain. In my case, it means I get a much crispier background that shows all this work without compromising the brightness of the shot. Before filming, I removed the sire's goatee because I know I want to be able to move it up and down as he speaks, but I do that part later in the computer, and these 3 dots will help the computer track that moving mouth and goatee onto his chin when that time comes. If you want to see how I've done that in the past, you can check out this video on how I did it in my short film Gruff. Yeah. To film any shot requiring puppetry requires at least 2 separate passes, a performance pass and a clean pass. The clean pass is used to fill in any space left by cutting out the rods, so I always film one of those after I've finished performing the puppet's motions. But if there's 2 characters, that means we also need 2 separate performance passes that'll end up having to be spliced together in the computer. So I perform each character's motion over and over and over within their pass till I feel like I've got something usable. After that, I take out the characters to shoot the clean pass. I shoot it totally empty at first, then, just to have the option, do a pass with some leaves cascading in the background just to liven up the environment a bit. So all of that is technically just take 1, and normally I'd go right inside to start reviewing the footage and lining up all my takes, but I realized I did all of take 1 without one of my main lights on. So I repeat the whole process again for take 2. This is a good time to spotlight a feature that I rely pretty heavily on with one-man filmmaking, which is autofocus. And the EOS C80 does that really well. It can accurately detect faces and even track their eyes. I imagine this would be incredible for real human faces, but with these stylized animated faces, it's actually keeping up really well. Once I get a bunch of passes for take 2, it's time to power down the garage and bring the footage into the computer to start testing it out. Once I upload my footage into my editing software, I review each performance pass and watch them over and over and over again, narrowing it down till I find my favorites. I'll do a rough splice of the passes to see if they work together, and if they don't, well, I have to go back outside and repeat everything for take 3. But since I'm liking what I have, I start going to work compositing the separate passes to remove the puppet rods. There's a bunch of different ways to do this depending on what software you prefer and what you like editing with, but overall, the more pixels that there are in the footage that I capture, the easier visual effects like rod removal are for me. So it's a huge help to me that the EOS C80 can shoot up to 6000 by 3164 resolution. That kind of detail really lets me get in close and precisely track or cut out whatever I need to in order to remove the rods. Now, this process can take much longer than a day, depending on the complexity of the shots, so I'll leave the rest for tomorrow, because the sun has gone down, I'm ready for dinner, and more importantly, so are the cats. Which, if I can just add, this Super Pro cinema camera has an animal mode for the autofocus detection, and it really works. Canon. You get me, you get the cat people. If you want to learn more about the EOS C80, feel free to check out the link in the description. There's a lot more behind the scenes headed your way, so stay tuned, and we'll see you in the next one.